Does Monday at the office feel like a storm? Not with Microsoft Copilot. That feeling when Copilot gets everyone up to speed instantly? It's sunny again. When Copilot simplifies complex data so your teams can act, that sun's shining on a beach. And when Copilot uncovers hidden insights, you're on that beach with your people, and you find buried treasure. That's Microsoft Copilot. Learn more at Microsoft.com/AI for all.
Today on CityCast Philly, the city has big plans to upgrade some of its public ball fields with artificial turf, but that material contains toxic chemicals known as PFAS, which are linked to some types of cancer. I'm speaking with two investigative reporters about the risks of fake turf and why Philly is still using it. It's Wednesday, March 6th. I'm Trenae Nuri, and here's what Philly's talking about. David Gambacorta and Barbara Laker, you're both investigative reporters with the Philadelphia Inquirer. Thanks for being on CityCast Philly.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks for having us.
Let's start really basic here. What is PFAS and why is it used in fake grass or turf to begin with?
Well, PFAS chemicals are a group of chemicals that are widely used in a whole bunch of products like Teflon, a lot of household products, food packaging, makeup, and carpeting. And they are used for artificial turf because the chemicals make the blades separate and stand up and look better and more aesthetic to people. And for years, decades really, the chemical companies and turf companies have used PFAS chemicals in the turf, but it was only really known by experts and found by experts in 2019.
Okay, so what are the health risks associated with PFAS?
Well, there's a range of different potential health risks that the Environmental Protection Agency and a number of other agencies have identified with PFAS. Certain types of cancers, like kidney cancer and testicular cancer. The chemicals have been linked to an increase in asthma and a reduced immune system, and I believe birth defects as well, right, Barbara?
Yeah, birth defects and infertility. It seems like every year experts are adding more health problems associated with them. And so they're of grave concern to a lot of agencies who are studying this and scientists and experts.
Yeah, I mean, all those health risks, and it's being used in artificial turf where we let our kids play all the time.
Right.
Are there a lot of these artificial turf fields in Philly?
Yes, there are. There are 14 play fields in Philadelphia that use artificial turf. 8 are city fields and 6 are maintained by the school district of Philadelphia. There are a few more planned in the city, and outside of that, the city wants to add 12 artificial turf fields in FDR Park.
Barbara, you spoke with some families of young athletes who actually got sick after playing on these surfaces. Can you tell us what they went through?
Oh, it was horrific. Most of the families I spoke with, the children were competitive soccer players. Most were goalkeepers. So they were on the turf a number of hours each week, almost every day for the entire year because they were club soccer players. And the families I talked to, the kids got a form of blood cancer. So Hodgkin's lymphoma, non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. And one child, it was tragic. One child we featured subsequently died from cancer. The other kids and families I spoke with, they had survived the cancer through chemo and radiation, but a lot of the families feared that the cancer could one day come back. So there's a coach in Washington State. She's a soccer coach, and she found like that 9 players that she knew. After years of not knowing any child with cancer, all of a sudden she knew 9 players battling cancer. And so she started to keep a list, and it was all anecdotal because it was just people across the country who heard about her and wanted to let her know that their child was battling cancer.
So this happened pretty quickly for these families.
Well, the kids that I spoke with or the families I spoke with, all of them were diagnosed as teenagers. And so, 14, 15, 16 years old were the ages that they were diagnosed with cancer. Some of them had symptoms looking back, like they may have had symptoms for like a year and a half, but they were undiagnosed. They were like some families thought their kids had an infection or the doctors thought they had an infection. And these are kids who would, most of the ones I had spoken with had played since they were young, like 6, 7 years old. So they'd had a number of years playing on artificial turf.
How did the families know or figure out that it was the turf that was making them sick?
Well, they can't say for sure it's the turf. David and I talked to a number of experts and people who study this, and it's very hard to draw a line between cause and effect with artificial turf or all the chemicals that are in the turf. All they know is that some people suspect that it's not a coincidence that all these kids are coming down with blood cancer, mostly blood cancers, and a lot of them were goalkeepers. And some people believe that the reason it affects goalkeepers more is because they dive for balls a lot and they're on the turf, very close to the turf. They also get burns on their skin from the turf, so they would have open wounds. And so no one can say for sure that this is the reason why these kids got cancer. All they know is that they suspect that here you have something they're playing on constantly that has all these carcinogens in it, and the kids who play on it have cancer.
More on this story after the break. This is CityCast Philly.
Shipping can make or break a sale, so optimize how you ship your orders with ShipStation. They make it easy to automate and manage orders no matter how big your business grows. And they might even be able to help reduce shipping and warehouse costs. So optimize and keep up your momentum for growth with ShipStation. Sign up for your free 60-day trial now at ShipStation.com and use the code POD. That's ShipStation.com with the code POD.
It's only a kick, a jump, a block. It's only a serve. It's only a tackle, a run. It's only for the fans. After all, it's only pressure. You got this. Adidas.
Okay, Barbara and David, despite all of these risks, you reported that Philly is still putting in new artificial turf fields. Where has this happened most recently?
So the most recent instance that we know of is at Murphy Recreation Center, which is in South Philadelphia. It's near 3rd and Chunk Streets. And we had asked the city under the Kennedy administration for information about plans for that field. Particularly, we were interested in who might be doing the work on installing the turf fields and which manufacturers the city might be purchasing the turf from. And we were denied that information. And I had noticed that work was being done on the field late last year. Just happened to be driving by one day and saw that the grass that had been there had been dug up and that turf was going to be put down. And it turned out that was part of a larger renovation of the rec center, $7.5 million renovation project. And so the turf is down. And after Barbara and I published the story on the young athletes who had developed cancer, the city had contacted us and said that they wanted to let us know that the turf at Murphy Rec was PFAS free. So we had asked if they could share proof, if they had tests that would back that up. So they had shared with us some test results that the manufacturer of the turf had provided to them. Barbara and I are always careful to emphasize to people that we're not scientists. So we asked 3 different experts to independently look at the test the city had shared with us and let us know what they thought.
And what were those findings?
Well, each of them independently came back and told us that the tests were misleading.
How so?
Well, as the city had put it to us, their understanding was that this turf didn't have any PFAS and that they thought that's what the test showed as well. But the experts explained to us the way that this was misleading was that the lab had set their detection limit for these chemicals extremely high. So for any to show up in the test, it would have had to have been an abnormally high amount of PFAS. So because that bar was not met, you could sort of infer that it must be PFAS free. And Barbara actually followed up with the lab that did the testing, and they acknowledged that this was true, that the detection limits they used were very high. And they even went as far as to say that there's no such thing as PFAS-free turf.
Interesting. David, I mean, after this story came out, after you all got expert information, is the city changing its plan at all?
I think with regard to Murphy, the city told us they would follow up with the manufacturer because now they have some questions about what they were told. But the bigger question is how this might impact the plans for FDR, which is now in the early stages of a $250 million renovation. And the city has said for several years now their intention is to put more than a dozen turf fields down there. And there's been pretty stiff opposition from a number of community groups and local residents who worry about the environmental impact of the turf and the impact that it could have on the health of children playing on it.
Why is turf like this so popular?
It's interesting. I mean, the sales pitch for this product going back to the late 1960s was that it was a cheaper and more durable way to create an outdoor play place for kids than natural grass. And the argument then was natural grass would, require a lot of upkeep. And all these decades later, it's essentially the same argument. And that's what the city has said for FDR Park. They believe they can get more use out of a turf field and that grass would be more expensive and more difficult to maintain. But they've also assured people that the turf that they'll use at FDR will be PFAS free. And, Barbara had an interesting discovery last year about whether that's possible. We tried repeatedly to get this organization called the Synthetic Turf Council, which represents all the manufacturers and contractors in the turf industry. We kept trying to get them to tell us whether or not current generations of turf still had these chemicals. And they just wouldn't answer us. And then Barbara found a letter that the president of this organization had sent to legislators in California because the state was considering banning the sale of any turf that had the chemicals. And the president of this organization wrote in her letter that it was going to take the industry, I think, like 2 or 3 years to figure out how to manufacture turf that doesn't have PFAS. And that was really, this was a piece of information that we were asked for a lot from people who wanted to know, hey, does turf still have this dangerous stuff? And Barbara found that they admitted it reluctantly in a letter.
Wow, that's major.
Yeah, now I think anytime we hear of somebody say, claiming, our turf is PFAS free, we always go back to that letter and we say well, yeah, if the industry says that it doesn't exist, then how can it exist?
Barbara and David, after everything you found out, would you let your kids play on this type of field? I mean, I'm a parent. I want my kids to play and be active in sports. It's, good for their social skills and good to keep them physically active. My son plays football and he's getting into lacrosse. So I'm like, after you found all this out, would you let your kids play on this type of a field?
I think it would give me pause, but I think that a lot of people across the country want the answer to that too. And that's why there's so many studies going on right now about it. And one thing experts pointed out to David and I is that they do believe that it is important, like how often the child is on turf, how frequently, and whether they play a lot in the summer months because it's more dangerous. The chemicals are more dangerous in the summer months because the turf heats up to like 160 degrees. And when it is heated up that much, it becomes more toxic, which means that children or anyone would breathe it in more than they would during the winter months.
What should Philadelphians know about, or what should they do if we find out something's dangerous about the fields where our kids are playing?
Well, I think information is power, and I think that people should ask the city for more information about the turf that they're putting down. And I mean, it's hard because, like we said earlier, like the city was told that the turf at Murphy Rec was PFAS free. And on that report, it actually says ND for non-detectable. And so you'd have to do what we did and take it to experts to find out whether it indeed does have PFAS in it, because it all does. Varying degrees of it, but it all does. And kind of like lead years ago, there was the Environmental Protection Agency said there's no safe level of lead. They're getting to closer and closer to that point with PFAS.
Barbara Laker and David Gambacorta, investigative reporters with the Philadelphia Inquirer, thank you so much for breaking the story down on CityCast Philly.
Thanks so much for having us.
Yeah, thank you. Appreciate it.
We'll have a link to this story and more reporting on this issue in our show notes. That's all for today here on CityCast Philly. Let us know what you think of this episode. Rate the show, leave us a review, and hit that subscribe button. Be sure to sign up for our morning newsletter, Hey Philly, to learn more about what else Philly's talking about. We'll be back tomorrow morning with more news from around the city. Bye.